Online friends, thank you for joining us. All right, and we are going to start with our lesson. I couldn't help myself. I had to add my own title. It may be Stewarding Our Resources, Lesson 8, but I had to kind of add my own thing too. So this one is called, Where Does the Money Go? So we do receive so many gifts. This is continuing on in our lessons on stewardship. And the lessons have been about stewarding life, and I keep battling, not battling, but the me wants to go back to teaching my lessons, but yet this is so needful and so I have found this so helpful. These are just really great. So this one, God's given us many gifts, like relationships, the gift of time. I mean, some things I don't think we even look at like they're gifts, but they are gifts. But the gift of finances is one of the few tangible, which that means it can be touched, physically touched. It's one of the few tangible gifts that God gives us to steward for His glory. So, stewarding our thoughts, it is going to end up showing outwardly, but yet it's not the same as the finance one, or stewarding our friendships. That's one stewarding. So the finance one, and that's what resources are. It covers many different areas, but this kind of zeroes in a little bit on finances. The resource of finance is one that physically passes through either our hands or through the checkbook or debit card. So it's one that we actually see. Okay, if I give this money, it's gone. It's out of there. I have to, so it kind of works a little bit differently. But did you know that that's a gauge of our heart? We can, Matthew 6:21 is on, we won't turn there, but Matthew 6:21 says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And I know we've probably all heard that. And I put, show me your checkbook ledger, or wherever it is that you keep track of what you're spending. And hopefully you do keep track of what you're spending and where. But show me that. Show me where you spend your money, and I'll be able to tell you where your heart is. And you can say the same of me. When you look at to go to a financial advisor that's not a Christian, he would look at ours and say, this is foolish. This is not really where you need to be doing this. You guys actually need to be putting it over here in retirement or whatever. But he doesn't understand. Okay? If it just is. I can tell you where your heart is, what's important to you, by telling you where you spend your money. If a person spends their money, let's say, this doesn't apply to any of us here, let's say a young mom, and she has a couple kids, and I open up her checkbook ledger and I see a bunch of ballet, gymnastics, season passes to ball games, all this stuff, and almost, very little in comparison goes to God. I can tell you where her heart is. Okay, it's with her kids first. Okay, if I look through, a checkbook ledger or wherever you're budgeting, and I see constant shopping at stores that I may even like, say Kohl's or TJ Maxx, or and over again, and in comparison, you see this little amount given to God. And it could even be a big amount given to God, but it could be more. But we're so busy we're so busy spending our resources and money on other things. And so it's a great gauge of your heart. Let's go to Matthew, and this is a great passage for this. Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. Let's read that together. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several ability. And straightway he took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. And verse 21, his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And verse 22, he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Verse 28, Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Whew. It's quite a parable if we really stop and think about it. So we're going to divide this into 3 parts. The first one that we're going to talk about with this passage is the distribution of resources. So the parable tells us that a wealthy man, he went on a long trip. And remember, every word of God is pure. So when God says he went on a long trip, this was not a 2-week trip. I mean, back in these days, it took forever to get wherever they're going. Mm-hmm. And they made long trips of it because it was so long and took so much time to get there. So he went on a long trip. And before he left, he called in 3 of his servants and left them with a sum of money. And I think it's very interesting in verse 15 that it says the master left each steward, each man, according to his several ability. According to what that master knew he was actually capable of dealing with, that's what the master left him. The one that he left 5 talents to, he was capable of dealing with 5 talents and making some more money. The one that he gave 2 talents to wasn't quite ready for the 5 talents. And the one that he gave 1 talent to, he wasn't ready for 2 talents or 5 talents to make more with. But guess what? He was ready for the 1 talent. The master knew them, and he gave according to what he knew they were capable of handling them and taking care of. And the master gave them his talents to manage for him while he was gone. Okay? So it wasn't, and let's just get into it. A says, we're going to, under the distribution of our resources, we're going to talk about the provider of the resources really briefly. And we all like, oh, I know this, but I don't know how much we really think about it. In the parable, the provider of the resources was the businessman in verses 14 and 15. Verses 14 said, For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling in a far country who called his own servants, not anyone else's, they were his own servants, and delivered unto them his good. He was their master. Okay? And our provider of resources, of every resource we have, is God. Mm-hmm. God the Father. When the kids were growing up, Pastor and I, we took care of them. But we made sure they understand what we got to take care of them, who that was from, and that was from God. So it was always like, oh, thank you, Mom and Dad. Well, you are very welcome. Thank you for thanking me. But I just want to let you know, too, that we could give you this food. We could give you this allowance. We could give you this new bike because of God. Yes. Everything's from God. And, that's important to teach kids, but it's also important to teach us as adults because we lose focus. Let's go to James 1:17 together. And that says, anyone want to read it? I'm dry.
I got it.
Go ahead, Carol.
Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning.
Yep, every good gift, thank you, Carol, and every perfect gift. Guess what? Do you remember that lesson, was it last week, on stewarding our trials? Or whatever week we did that? Guess what? We did do that one, right? Stewarding our trials?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to remember, like in my brain. Sorry, I didn't mean to make a facial expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that was lesson, I believe that was lesson 7. Stewarding our trials or the hard things that come into our life. And so that is a gift. And that was what it was telling, that lesson was trying to show us, is that we have to look at it. It's perspective. We have to look at the trials in our life. Not just the good things, not just the mountaintops, but the valleys too and the in-betweens. We have to be able to look at those as gifts, and that's what this is. And so we have to remember that every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. And if God gives it to us, it's a perfect gift. So that pretty much takes care of everything, not just the things that feel good to us, not just the things that look good to us or that appear to make us joyful or happy or whatever, but also the gifts that he brings up in our lives that are trials, like, illnesses and relationship issues, that kind of thing. Those are also gifts, but it's how we accept it and what we learn from it that determines whether we view it as a gift or not. So Psalm 24:1, let's go there together. Psalm 24:1. You guys are all there before me? All right, who wants to read that one?
The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell in.
And they that dwell in, yep, the earth is Lord, meaning every single thing is from God. Okay, I put here, God made it, God owns it all. It doesn't matter if the economy fails. Do we catch that? It doesn't matter if the economy fails. I was listening to WVGV this morning, Brother Arez's station, and they have something about, I can't remember, some kind of update on prophecy fulfilling. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I always try to listen to that because it's kind of telling us about the fulfillment of end times. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about how the guy said, just so you know, the American dollar is going to fail. We are going to come to a time, and it may not be that far away, where the American dollar is not going to fail. Some people, when they listen to that, it strikes panic into them. And we have to be just like, you know what? We're talking about God here. God never fails. God owns it all. God made it all. There is no problem in God's economy. Right. And we have to keep focus on that so that things like that don't scare us. And when it happens, that we're not scared. Okay, so remembering who the provider of our resourcer is, and he never ever fails in us. Then the next point under the distribution of our resources is the provider of resources and then the people of his provision. Okay, so that's us. We are managers of a trust fund. You ever heard of a trust fund that maybe kids have a trust fund and until they're, to the point where that they can handle it? Yeah. Then it's given all to them. But in the meantime, there's a manager of that trust fund, meaning the money isn't theirs to do whatever they like with, but instead they're managing it and that money is funneling through them. Mm-hmm. And they give advice and they decide, they do make decisions, because the person who that is for, may not be to the age where they can do it or whatever. So that person, the manager of the trust, is doing just that, managing that money. That's us. Okay? God knows exactly what he's doing with his money, so he's not the one that's not, in that case scenario. But he has, just like the master in this parable, the master had managers of his money. And he brought him in, he said, okay, I know what each of you can handle. You know, it's a poor store manager that puts people in the department manager positions that can't handle it, okay? Their job as a store manager is to know people enough and to know their employees enough and to know the hiring process enough that they have a pretty good idea this person can handle it, you know? If I were to go to an ER room, it wouldn't take them long to figure out I can't handle it. Okay, been there, done that. It's just not my thing. So this in the parable, this master knew you can handle 5 and make me money. You can handle 2 and make me money. You can handle 1, and there was no you know I'm giving you more, so you're better. There you don't see any of that.
Right.
He just gave them, and it was according to what they could handle. And that's us. Our life is not about accumulating or owning things. And I would say we all have a pretty good grasp on that in this room. But, you know, sometimes that green head just rears its ugly self when you least expect it. Something can just trigger, you know, where I go, you know, I just wish I was in a house. Okay, so our window shades were open yesterday, and people are going by the backyard because they cut through to the dumpster in our apartment. And Devin's like, oh, it's so nice to have people going by while we're all in here visiting. And I'm just like, you know. And so for a moment, I had some uncontentment. I'm like, I just want to be in a house. And most of the time, I don't feel that way. But I did. And I'm not saying it was wrong for me to feel that way, but I'm saying I knew I better get my emotions and my perspective right. I said, God, help me to always be content where you have us and what we're doing. So it's not about things, but we are human. So we do have an understanding of that. You know, it's as I said, it's not that initial thought. It's what we do with it. You know, and it's so easy to dwell on things and I do feel blessed this way. I'm not somebody who turns things over and over again in my mind. If you are,
Heaven help us.
my husband is. And I know others that just turn things over and over in their mind, and that definitely has its good points. But it can be a struggle for you as well if you're that person. And it's a struggle for me in other areas, but I do feel blessed that I don't think things real deep, you know, it's just like, so we need to manage what God has given us, managing the resources that he's given us. Like the master in the parable, God blesses us according to our ability to steward for him. God is not going to, it makes me think of Faith Promise Missions. God's not going to have the baby Christian committing the same amount to missions, Faith Promise Missions, to give to missionaries every month or every week that he has Pastor and I. Why? Because we've done this for a long time, and that faith muscle has grown and grown. And that person is not ready to do it in that amount. But guess what? The amount we give is no more anything. It doesn't make us more of anything than it does that person. Okay? But the key is to be giving what God gives you to give, tells you to give. That's the key. If you're not doing that, then we're disobeying. Okay? But the amounts don't matter as long as we're obeying. And that's what, you know, so the steward that had the 1 talent, he was every bit, his job was every bit as important as the 2 talent and the 5 talent. Okay? But he did have a job with it. He did have a job to make more money with that 1 talent. That was what the master left him. He said, I'm leaving you my money. I'm going away for a long time. When I come back, I want more money. You know, and that was only reasonable is, you know, he wanted them to be diligent and to make money with it. We become a steward success in our Christian lives by faithfulness and not volume. Okay, 1 Corinthians 4:2. Quiet group today, not a lot chatting going on. All right, 1 Corinthians 4:2 says, moreover, it is required in stewards, that's us, that a man be found faithful. Okay? It's not how much that you give. You can drop a big check in the offering plate. Okay? But if you're not tithing,
Right.
Your spirit, the right spirit has to be behind it too, not to look at
Yep.
any type of attitude.
that's true. But faithfulness is super important.
Yeah.
God wants us to be, and we've talked about, there's a command to tithe in the Bible, okay? So it's really important that a person is tithing off their income, whatever that may be, and that's faithfulness, doing that over and over and over again, doing it when the bills are high, doing it when the bills are low, and you seem to have extra money. You know, it's great to be able to write out and say, well, I'm going to give this money to them. Or I told you before, we had somebody try to give us their tithe. We were in Bible college, not starving, because we all know that's not true. But, I mean, I was making chicken stew with no chicken. But that's how spoiled we are, too, as Americans. It was just chicken flavors. My husband's like, Julie, where's the chicken? I said, we don't have chicken. You know, but we were fine. And,
Ramen noodles.
yeah, and someone tried to give us a $3,000 check, and it about killed us, but we knew it was wrong.
Mhm.
Why? Because they told us it was their tithe money. And they said, we just haven't settled in a church yet. So, you know, and they were attending church but hadn't joined it, okay? And so they were going to give us their tithe money because we were in Bible college. They saw that as a work of the Lord. That's not okay. Our tithe, according to God's word, goes to the storehouse. It belongs to God's house, and that's how it runs and stuff. But we need to be faithful in our tithe before we're doing anything else. If a guest speaker comes in, or a tour group or something like that, and someone hands them $500, that's wonderful. But if you're not tithing every week to the local church, that's disobedience, okay? Not tithing is disobedience. And that is not something we hear much of anymore, is it? Preachers do not like to preach that. And my husband doesn't, I don't believe he says that more than he says anything else, but he doesn't shy away from what the Bible says, because how are we going to know to do things for two things? And we sit under the preaching, and the preacher preaches the whole counsel of God, and then B, we're reading God's word, okay? And we should always be reading what the preacher is preaching to make sure he's preaching correctly. And he is. He's teaching us about tithing. So it's not volume that matters in your giving and in, you know, you're stewarding your resources. It's your faithfulness. Who's got the time?
Oh, sorry.
No, you don't.
25
It's,
till.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So, number 2, the demonstration, thanks to, I had it in my bag and I forgot to take it out. The demonstration of stewardship. We had the distribution of our resources, the demonstration of stewardship. In this parable, the 3 stewards fell into 2 categories. The first one is the faithful stewards. Realize that the master in the parable was gone a long time, and throughout that time, 2 of those stewards worked diligently and consistently to make more money for the master than what he left them. Again, you know, we said that was only reasonable. That's Matthew 25, 16, and 17, and we don't have to turn there because we read that. So this is referring to hard work, not get-rich schemes. And
Right.
you know, when people are down on their dollar or they just kind of have an entrepreneur mind, lots of times that becomes something that comes into view, and they're like, oh, I wonder if I could make money. Somebody was trying to do that with our church building when we first moved in here. We got caught in a Ponzi scheme, you know, and if you don't know what that is, look it up, Google it. But thankfully, God worked that all out in our favor because we had no part of it. It was the person that was leasing us this building. But God used it for good. But 1 Timothy 6:9, let's turn there together. 1 Timothy 6:9. You there, Jen?
Yeah.
Go ahead and read that.
But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition.
Okay, so someone that wants to be rich, you know, they're going to be tempted. If you have that desire, like I want to be rich, and really it's for selfish reasons, you're gonna be tempted. You're going to fall into temptation, and you know that's not what this is all talking about. This is talking about hard work. The master gave them money and wanted them to work. Didn't want them to foolishly invest his money.
Right.
But he wanted them to work and make more of the money. And there are godly men who God entrusts with resources that are rich. They have money. But, and I have some friends, and they are such a conduit for Christ. They make, I don't think that they have money because they've worked hard and they've been wise with it, but they're a conduit. The money that flows through them, that God, you know, says, give to that person. But I promise you, they are tithing. I know it. They are tithing and giving offerings and missions. And then they're doing all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And it is mind-blowing. We were even the recipients of it. It was just, you know, they're like, you are doing God's work. And it's just amazing to see how God has blessed them. Why? Because they're just a conduit, a funnel for all this money, you know. And he said, this money's not ours. We're just managing it for God. They were the perfect example of stewarding our resources. And I was so thankful to, they were very encouraging to us this way, because sometimes, you know, that little green monster is trying to talk to me, and I don't want him to talk to me. I need to just refocus. And so to have that person in front of our face going, we're just conduits for Christ. You know, yes, that's my bandwagon that I want to be on. That is my bandwagon. I don't need things for myself. I want to be a steward of what God's given me. In the purple there, the two faithful stewards were successful because they maintain a stewardship mentality. And that's the truth. That's what we should have with all of our finances, is a stewardship mentality. Like, you know what? Just like he kicked back and said, we're a conduit for Christ. You know, that kind of mentality makes him a successful steward. That's what I want to be. I want to understand, as the church pays pastor and we go to write our bills out, everything, conduit for Christ, conduit for God. Lord, where do you want this money to go? Lord, what do you want me to give to missions? Lord, what do you want me to spend on groceries? Lord, what do you want me, where you want me to live? What kind of payment you want me to have? You know, all this stuff, those are all questions that we should be asking God. And it's just really, really important to be a successful steward. We're going to have that stewardship mentality, like, all this money, or what money is in my checking account, this is actually God's, and I've got to manage it the best that I can, like he would want it to be managed, like he would manage it himself. Okay? And how are we going to know that? Read the word and walk with God. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, it's just like, write that person a check. Okay? Increase your missions to that. Cut back in this area. And then the second one under the demonstration of stewardship is the faithless steward. You had the faithful steward, which I forgot to underline, and then you have the faithless steward. That third steward, he panicked. He panicked and buried that talent that the master had left him. It was safely kept from loss, you know, and he immediately started making excuses about what a hard and shrewd man, and I know, you know, no. Okay, the master didn't want to hear all that. The master had given him a talent, and he expected more when he returned from that long trip. That was his job, to manage that money for him. And he didn't. He panicked and he buried it. So while it was safe from failure, I mean, he didn't lose the talent, but it was also safe, unfortunately safe from success and multiplying as he was supposed to. Matthew 15:18. Who has that one? Donna?
But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man.
So the steward was trying to protect himself, but it was a loss for his master, you know, and he didn't want to be accused of not doing anything, you know, of losing that talent that he had been left with. But That wasn't what his job was. His job wasn't to protect the talent. What was his job, according to the master? To spend it properly and multiply it. So he could have done something with it. He could have done something with it, but he didn't. So then part 3 is the day of reckoning. In the parable, the master returned, just like he said he would. Matthew 25:19. Let's go back there together. Matthew 25:19.
I got it.
All right, go ahead and read that.
After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and
Reckoneth with them.
with them.
Okay. So after that long trip, master came back like he said he would. And who are the first people he's going to want to see? The 3 that he left his money with. And I meant to look up how much a talent was to give us an idea, and I forgot. But he had given, let's see, 5, 7, 8 talents. He was looking, the day of reckoning, he was looking for more than 8 talents to be here. He'd been gone a long time. And, so he wanted to see what they had done with what they were entrusted with. Because the first 2 were faithful stewards, they were eager to see the master. Isn't that the truth? They knew that they had done what they had been asked to do. So they were excited. They had no.
Your mom comes home
Yep.
and she wanted you to do A, B,
And
C.
she left you a list. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were excited, but not the other guy. The third steward, he was the faithless steward, and he tried to make an excuse, but there was no excuse. He hadn't done right with what he'd been left. What about us? Are we doing right with what we've been given to manage? Every penny that comes in to us as Christian ladies. I think of my mom. My mom is married to an unsaved man. But I know my dad has given my mom money. And whatever she gets that is hers, she tithes on. Okay? That's important. So maybe if you're not married to a saved person and he won't allow you to, then you need to, when you're, and it sounds crazy, but even when you're given, $5, you put aside 50 cents. Okay? If he gives you $100 to go shopping, you put aside $10 and you tithe off it. And that's how you can be a good steward of what God has given you. Okay? And then for those of us with an income, okay, then we need to say to our husbands, if they are unsaved, you know what? I want to tithe on what I'm making. Would you allow me to do that? And if I were you, I would put in much prayer about that before you go to your husband and talk about that. Okay? And there are very, very many cases where right time, right attitude, and right place of asking that the husband allows that wife. And guess what? That family is super blessed. But you know what? It may start with the husband seeing you tithe off what you've been given. Okay? And just say, well, I actually couldn't get that coffee today, because I put aside the 50 cents of the $5. But that's okay. I'll get it the next $5. And it making a sacrifice on that part. And he's going to be like, what? But my dad has seen my mom do this, and then he's been a little bit more free with what he's given her and what she's been able to tithe off. And I do think my dad has an understanding of financial blessings because of mom's faithfulness in stewarding her resources. And sometimes I know he would be like, Rachel, you feed everybody in our town, And you know what? My husband does that too. But understanding that it's stewarding our resources. And then on the back, 5 habits that are consistently present in Christians who handle their finances wisely. That is for you to read this week. And I encourage you to look up all the scriptures, and it was really good. And then I think next week is stewarding our friendships. All right, we're going to say goodbye to our online friends. Thank you for joining us.